We had to end the previous video because it started to get long, and I still have some more things that I need to tell you in your introduction to loops. And most important, I want to tie together loops and arrays because they work together really well. So we covered the top part of this demo 6 for loops, and now I'm going to continue where we left off, so with the next step. Now we're going to do something a little different. We are going to start with 0 in this case. We are going to end with 10. And what is this cute little thing? This is not the same as what we had before. Before we had I plus equals 10, so we added 10, or we had I minus equals 10, we subtracted 10. So now we're going to do something different. We are going to, what is plus plus? It's an even shorter way to say add something, but what? It always means 1. So when you see I plus plus or apple plus plus or x plus plus, it means add 1 to the value of that variable. So can you figure out what this is going to do before I copy it and paste it? Okay, about to hit return. Do you know what it's going to do? Is that what you expected? I hope so. So last for loop example of this type, what do you think the next one's going to do? Instead of starting with 0, we start with 10. We end at 0, and I'm hoping you can figure out what that's going to do. If I plus plus adds 1 to I minus minus subtracts 1 from I. So let's clear down here. Clear, copy, paste, and voila. Okay, so again, these are simple instructions, examples for beginners. What you would do in a real program would be a little more complicated. Now, hang in there because we're going to get back to arrays, and I'm going to show you how to use a for loop to cycle through an array. So instead of using numbers, we're going to go through all the items in an array, which in this case only has 4 items, but an array could be really huge. It could have thousands of items, and maybe you would search using a for loop. But we're just going to look at each one because, you know, we're just beginning. So it's an array that you've seen before, fruits. It's got 4 fruits in it. And our for loop is a little bit different, okay? The order is the same. It tells us where to start, okay? So I is 0. This time the 0 is going to be the index of the item in the array. So you know that the first item has an index of 0. Now, where does it end? Ooh, what is this? It tells us where to end, but what does this fruits dot length mean? I'll show you down in the console. We've already got our array defined, so if I type fruits dot length semicolon, it tells me how many things are in the array. All right, so this is a pretty neat way to cycle through an array. And then the third item, what is it going to do every time? It's going to increment the value of I by 1, meaning it's going to add 1 to I every time the loop runs. So if you can sort of picture this, it's first going to do something with item index 0 in the array. Then the loop will run again, and it will do the same thing with item index 1. And then the loop will run again, and it'll do the same thing with item index 2. And so on up to, you know, some huge number. So it works the same way as before, and this time instead of console log, we're going to do alerts. Well, I don't know if we want to do that. Let's do console log. Okay, so you can try alert at home, but I'm going to do console log. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it, but I'm going to go back and I am going to change alert to console log. I just think it's a little quicker for us. Okay, so can you picture what it's going to do? I'm about to hit return. That's what it does. Okay, so it loops through and it writes each item in the array to the console. All right, so let's clear that. And let's look at a slightly different format. And let's keep them both on there so you can look at them both. All right, this is so much shorter and easier. And this doesn't work with a set of numbers because with numbers, you really have to define the beginning and the end. But here, because JavaScript can actually figure out how many items are in the array without you saying figure out the length of the array. So there's a shorter form of a for loop that you can use on any array, okay? And basically it's doing the same thing. It's setting up the index, but it just assumes you want to do the whole array, and it assumes that you want to add one every time. So it's a lot shorter than our first version, which had to start at 0. This one doesn't. Right? It had to get how long is fruits. This one doesn't. And it had to say, and add 1 each time. And this one doesn't. So, much quicker. And again, I'm going to change alert to console log just so I don't have to do a lot of things in the browser here. Console.log. Okay, and I'm about to press return. Do you know what it's going to do? It does exactly the same thing it did the last time. All right, so back up to where these things are written out, where both of them are. This is the first kind of for loop that we learned. And this, for an array, does exactly the same thing. All right, and there's one last little cool thing to learn. You don't have to use I as the variable. You can make up any name like Apple or Bozo or X, Y, Z. And it's typical for programmers to name an array with a plural word, and then when they run their for loop, they will use the singular word instead of I. So you'll often see this in other people's programs where when they're looping through an array, this is a thing we do a lot in code, we loop through arrays to do things to them. And this is a really common way to write it, and it means exactly the same thing as this. It's just that instead of writing I for our variable name, we wrote fruit for our variable name. Similarly, in the instruction line, instead of I, we wrote fruit. These two things have to match. If it's fruit here, it had to be fruit there. If it's I here, it had to be I there. It won't work if you mix and match, right? They have to be the same. So if I run this one, copy, go down here and paste, and this time I'll do the alerts so you can see what they're like. I press return, and then we'll get an alert. And when I make that one go away, I get the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the cantaloupes are the last. So this is the end of our whirlwind tour of arrays and loops. You will learn more about both of these. They're really important elements in programming, and as we go along, we'll see them again and again.